Hello, welcome back to the Unpacked Traveler Podcast, where we unpack the wonders and challenges of long term travel so you can feel empowered to enjoy this lifestyle in your most confident way. Welcome back to the last episode of the first season. This first season was really special for me. It was like the beginning of everything. This podcast is going to be big. I think this first season was just a season to set the tone for the next few seasons and the next projects that I want to have alongside the podcast. The next season is going to be so great. I want to invite guests and invite people to talk about specific countries and how they felt when they went there, and also specific lifestyles and specific traveler ways to raise kids. And there's so much I want to talk about in this podcast and invite people to do it with me. And I'm really excited because it's big. It's a big project and it's a big idea, and it feels sometimes unreachable and too hard to reach, honestly. But I think all great ideas sound a bit crazy in the beginning until they're actually made. So I'm getting super hyped about the podcast. I think this season was just for me to get used to recording, get used to talking to a microphone, and actually to check how I feel with it and how it feels for me, if it feels right. And the more I do it, the more right it feels. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this first season, and I'm sure you're gonna, if you have, I'm sure you guys are gonna enjoy the next one. And I love how my brain works. I think I went it all backwards. I was meant to talk about the second season in the end of the episode, but I think I was so excited about it that I was just talking about it in the beginning of the episode. Anyway, this episode is going to be really interesting. We're going to talk about how it feels to go back home after 3 years of living abroad. Because that's right, I'm recording this in October before actually the release of the podcast. But by the time you're listening to this, I'll be in Brazil already. So already going to be experiencing everything that I'm going to talk about in this episode. But I'm going to talk about how, in the last episode, actually, I talked about how traveling shapes us and transforms us, and how now in this episode, I'm going to talk about how this transformed and shaped person feels when they, or myself, go back to our home country. There's a lot to it, so let's get unpacked. Okay, I think the first thing is why come back? Why am I going back to Brazil? And this is important. I'm not going back full time. I'm just spending 3 months and a half just running away from the winter in the summer in Brazil, which is really smart of me to do. I'll be thankful for it, I think. But yeah, I think why am I going back? I just miss Brazil. I feel like I've been feeling really connected to the places that I travel to, and it feels right. And I think it's only right for me to do the same in the place that raised me, in the country that raised me. I'm Brazilian. All my roots are Brazilian. I am a full-time Brazilian. I'm a real Brazilian. I really want to connect with that feeling and get to know our beautiful country a bit more. The more I travel, the more I meet new people, the more they talk about Brazil with property. And I don't, because I haven't traveled so much there. And it feels just right that I do so. It feels right that I get to know my own culture, my own background in a way that it makes me connect to it a bit more. And because in São Paulo, right, where I'm from, we have, of course, a Brazilian culture, but I feel Brazil is so huge, dude. There's the north and the south and the central area. Anyway, there's so much, the Amazon, and it's like a whole Europe, you know? And I've been traveling through Europe. I've traveled throughout the States, and it just doesn't feel right that I don't do the same in my own country. It has never felt right. And I also want to do that in South America. In the future, I will. It's just not the right time right now because Brazil is my priority, if that makes sense. And I get it that a point that I want to talk about, a challenge and a reason of anxiety in my mind has been the expectations versus reality, of course. Because the same way we idealize and fantasize about places abroad before we go on a trip to them, we do the same when we go back to Brazil. I do the same before going back to Brazil. I forget the cultural stuff that I don't appreciate or that I don't agree with, or the values that I don't take it for myself. And I take it for granted and I pretend that they don't exist until I'm back there, until I really feel them again. And fuck, that's why I left, Like, there are moments where that happens. So it's good for me to put my feet on the ground and like be down to earth, that these, like, I'm not gonna be, it's not gonna be a fantasy. It's not gonna be a dream. It's gonna be, there's gonna be challenges as with anything in life, but I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make the most out of it, and I'm gonna enjoy myself. And another challenge that already comes, I think, with it is not losing myself. And that feels really tricky and really hard to explain even. But basically, the Mari, right? Mari is my name. The Mari that lived in Brazil, it's really different from the one that lives nowadays. Not because of the geolocation, but because of the things that happened within these 3 years that shaped me into a new me. But for some psychological reason, when I go back to Brazil, it's almost natural that the other Mari kinds of take over. And I don't want to let that happen. The first time I went back to Brazil in 2022, that happened. The second time I went to Brazil in 2023, the first time was only 1 week. The second time was also 3 months. The second time was easier. Like, I was a bit more myself and a bit less the old Mari. And the goal for me in this next time is to really be the new me. Like, I'm gonna fucking bring myself with me to that trip, which is not always what happens. And there is like psychological reasons for it and explanations, like triggers, and how, I don't know, we're like kind of like taken back to moments in our childhood and our teenage years. But I really want to, with all of my efforts, make sure I can be still me and still the person who I am. And when I say it has changed, I became like this international person. Okay, I'm Brazilian, but I'm international being. I don't know even like, I think there's one YouTuber that I really like that's called Damon, and he has a book talking about like being a global citizen. And that's kind of, I haven't read the book yet, but he's talked about it in some of his videos. And I kind of relate to that because as we travel so much, we kind of like pick up on different cultures and we become this international citizen that's really, really strong. And the more we live abroad and the more we travel, the more this personality sticks on top of our like original one, which mine is Brazilian. So it's interesting that I kind of feel like an outsider when I go back to Brazil. But how can I deal with this feeling of being an outsider everywhere? Because if I feel like an outsider in my own country, and I also feel like an outsider in all of the other countries that I travel to, it's kind of like the feeling of being an outsider is within me, and it's shaped my reality into anywhere I go. So how can I deal with that? So that's another thing that I really want to focus on, is how to not force myself to fit in, not force myself into being this Brazilian me, just fucking being me. And if that means that I'm gonna dress in a way that Brazilians don't appreciate, or my hair is gonna be in a way that people don't usually wear it, it's okay. I'm allowed to be this global citizen that I've come to be. And I think you might be wondering, like, how is Brazil so different from Europe in that matter, like clothes-wise and hair-wise? For those who don't live in Brazil, but even for those who do and have not realized that yet, Brazil has a big pressure on self-image and how you present yourself to the world, especially for women. So yeah, the beauty pressure in Brazil is really, really tough for me, especially like the way I've been always raised to do my nails and to do my hair and to always put makeup on and choose my clothes really wisely. And like, I still have that in me, a part of it, but not as an obligation for social conduct. Only because I really like to dress up nicely for myself. So even like I do this at home. I do this when I work from home. I like to like get my clothes to look nicely and I feel more productive. But the pressure of having that, I think it's not really nice. And whenever I go back to Brazil, that's something that it hits me, like the way that people talk about our hair and our skin. They're always having comments on the way we're looking. And I really, really, really hate that. Like, I don't relate to that at all. I really much feel like the way that Europeans are, like, they don't even talk about it. They don't care, like if they notice, they'll keep them to themselves. But I don't even think they're noticing all the time as Brazilians do. So this is one example. In the next season, I want to also bring like differences from Brazil to Europe, from Brazil to the States, and so forth. And it's funny, like, as we travel and we go back to our countries, there's no way we're not going to compare countries, in not even in a way that's like one is best and one is worse, but more in a way that this relates to me more than the other. And I really I can't avoid it. That's how my mind kind of like works as well. So I actually appreciate the observe, not judge, but also judge a little bit. It's kind of like a reverse culture shock, which is interesting. And another aspect, this podcast episode, by the way, has been so helpful for me to handle my own anxieties about going back to Brazil. I'm going to laugh about it because I'll be listening to this when I'm in Brazil, so that's going to be interesting. And I think another aspect that I think is going to be hard is that, we leave our past in Brazil. When I left Brazil, I left my past there, the people that were in my past that hurt me in the past or that didn't. And I feel like when we're constantly seeing these people or these people are in our reality, it's easier to get over them and get over the things that they've done to us or etc. But when we leave Brazil, it's kind of like I left this to be handled in Brazil also. Like, I don't really feel like I've handled some emotions and some connections and I've gotten over it. So it also feels really weird to go back to Brazil and fuck, I have to deal with this shit now. It's very, I don't know if it's that relatable for anybody else. I would love if you could say yes or no to me on that matter. And coming back to what I was saying about bringing the new me back to Brazil with me, it's also a part of bringing the routine that I've created for myself and the life that I've created for myself back to Brazil with me. When I was living in Brazil, I lived with my mom. I lived in their routine, and it's okay, like that's, I really enjoyed it. That. But after I left and got to know the routine in the States that I've lived for a while and the routine in Europe, I've kind of like, again, picked up on some stuff from each. And now I have this own routine of mine, the way I like to eat, when I like to eat, what I like to eat, the way I even like to shower and relax and have a long bath and light up candles. I don't know. There's some stuff in my life that I can't have it in Brazil. So it's also a bit like, how can I make sure I'm bringing these important stuff of my routine back to Brazil with the tools that Brazil can provide me with, which is, it feels that I'm saying like, oh, because Europe has this and Brazil haven't. And no, it's not like in that way. It's just like when you live alone, for example, and then you go back to living with your mom. It's actually exactly that. So I really want to bring back to Brazil with me like this journaling moments, meditation moments, even yoga. Like, these are things that I do in my week that really help me connect with myself and be my best version. And I really want to go back to Brazil and bring all of that with me so I can also be this better version of myself there. And also about like the living with the mom. That's true, dude. Like I'm going back to Brazil, I'm staying in São Paulo, and I'm gonna be at my mom's house. It's my home, right? But it's also my mom's house. So it's funny, and there's a lot of mental preparation that required because again, you're having to adapt to a whole new scenario, but it's not only new, it's also old, and that's why it's tricky for me. Because if it's only new, that like new is everything for me. I travel to new places all the time and find out like new ways of living all the time, but going back to the old, I think that's where I have a hard time with. And I think a funny topic is also I'm talking about like the perception of myself with the outside world. But what about the outside world perception of me? Which is really like, I know we shouldn't think about what the others is thinking about ourselves, but sometimes I do. It's natural for me and I'm trying to get away from it, but I can't. And now I'm going to get real with it. Like sometimes I forget words in Portuguese. Sometimes I use words in English instead of the ones in Portuguese. Even though I remember the one in Portuguese, I just prefer to use the one in English. And how will people, like, people are going to think that I'm so stuck up and, but that's not true at all. It's just like we live abroad, we speak English a lot, and we get to use more sometimes even the English than the Portuguese. So it's normal that we forget some words, and it's not because we're being stuck up. It's because it's like natural for our brain. And it's also like funny because I know São Paulo, I know my city. I know it can be really headache and really stressing and really like fast paced. And I also know that I've been living in Berlin for a while and in Europe, and the pace of life here is completely different. I feel like São Paulo really can relate more to New York and the States in general, much more than in Europe. So I feel like it could be challenging for me to, I don't know, just have this contrast really intensely, not only emotionally, again, because of all the factors that I've mentioned, but also because it's a city that I can't relate with anymore. Oh, it's gonna be tough, dude. I'm like almost giving up my trip with this podcast episode. I'm kidding. And I think that's interesting. That's no, yeah, that's a good point because I'm gonna miss it here. And that's a feeling that's so common to have. Like, we're never, ever satisfied. We're always missing something. We are satisfied. Okay, we're satisfied, we're happy, but, however, we're always missing something. So whenever I'm in Brazil, I'm going to be missing Europe. Whenever I'm in Europe, I miss Brazil. And it feels like a really common feeling among travelers from the conversations that I've had in my life. And I think it's a part of our lives, we're always going to be missing something. It's amazing to have multiple homes, but it's not easy because we're going to always be missing at least one of them. So it's really tough. I'm really excited for it. And I'm going to be in Brazil already when this episode is released. So I am excited, probably enjoying my best life on the beach right now. So let's wait. Let's get it over with this episode. And this season, oh my God. Guys, the next season, I'm so excited for it. It's going to be, hopefully, it's going to be really different than this one. I really want to bring in guests and people. I'm going to train myself to interview people, which is going to be really exciting. And I really want you to have different perspectives on travel, because I don't want to be only me and my perspectives and the way I feel. I want to bring in people that have been to China, have been to the Middle East, have been to Japan, have been to India. I want to talk to many people and have their perception of traveling, of this country, of being an outsider, really like getting deep in the conversation, talking about the emotional factors and the really psychological factors that travel have on us. I might even invite like a psychiatrist or a psychologist to the podcast so they can talk about how travel shapes us and shapes our brains. And I don't know, I'm just passionate about travel. I'm passionate about knowledge, and I'm passionate about spreading all of that and all of this knowledge that I gather with you. I feel like this year, 2025, is gonna bring in a lot of new stuff for me. I really want I really want my apartment in Berlin. I really want to dive deep in the podcast and create a lot of valuable stuff for you and really make it big, Like I don't want it to be only the podcast. I want it to be like a full community. I want to really help all of the travelers and nomads out there and improve what's lacking regarding information about travel and about traveling to non-touristic places, female travel, female solo travel. I really want to take it to the next step. So this 2025 year is going to be really exciting. If you have followed me in this past 10 episodes, please let me know. Let me know if you have enjoyed this season. I'm super hyped. I'm super excited about it. And I'm super excited for what's coming next. So get ready for it and stay with me. I hope you have an amazing end of the year. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I hope all of your New Year resolutions come true in 2025. And if these resolutions have anything to do with travel, please let me know. And I would love to help you make your dreams come true. So thank you so much. And I'll see you in the next season in 2025. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm so hyped. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for listening and see you next year. Besitos.